I want you to tell us briefly your memory about winning your medal and about what you feel, where you feel the state of the sport is in your country now.
You know, I think getting to Barcelona was such a lengthy road. You know, like you were there 18, I was there 25. You know, missed out on the 84 Olympic Games, you know,
Right,
even though I didn't
right.
qualify, missing out on the 88 because South Africa wasn't there, you know. So getting into Barcelona, you know, it was just such an unbelievable emotional roller coaster.
Yes.
You know, only in May that year, we achieved unity within South Africa. You know, so in May, I had the first opportunity to compete outside South Africa at the Unity Games in Dakar, Senegal. You know, and a bare 2 months later, it's the Olympic Games. You know, so sort of just getting into Barcelona, it was just, it was filled with so much emotion. You know, like I really wanted to be there, you know, missed out on 2 games, being, having been running really good times, but never had the opportunity to race the athletes. You know, so when I walked onto the track, it was like, almost like unreal, you know, this is the opportunity. You know, so then obviously the race, you know, started, it was an emotional race. I was so excited, nervous, you know, this is the opportunity I was waiting for so long. You know, so even winning silver, you know, it meant gold to me. You know,
I feel your pain. I know about that silver medal.
You know, so now looking back, you know, it's more than 22 years later.
Wow.
You know, it was like, you know, I was striving for South Africa to compete internationally, you know, and now 22 years later, you know, it's really disappointing because now the athletes have got the opportunity, but somehow, you know, the system have failed the athletes. And it's sad to see, and I think, you know, we need a federation with credibility, and I think over the last couple of years, you know, we didn't have that, you know, and people don't want to get involved if the federation is not credible. You know, so the baton has been passed on, and we, you know, now have the opportunity to, you know, to look at it fresh again.
Let me throw this out to the panel. Any of you guys who feel so inclined, jump in. We've heard people talk about other sports. What do we, as the sport of athletics, what do we bring to a potential sponsor that you think is unique to us? Is there something that we can say, hey, we bring this, and football doesn't give it to you, cricket doesn't give it to you, rugby doesn't give it to you? Is there something that one of you guys can venture?
I think for me, in watching athletics, I think athletics, unlike any sport, brings incredible human stories. So many athletes come from all sorts of backgrounds, how they get found into the sport. They all have their own story. And I think, you know, as opposed to a team where a lot gets lost behind, the team has a great story. Athletics is an incredible event where every single athlete has a story. And it was interesting for, you know, having a look at Adidas, where they're looking at that asset. What is his story? What does that persona bring to it? You know, you've got 2 great marathoners today with in some respects, a very similar story, coming from a very similar part of the world, but also a very different story for each human being. And for me, that, you know, on top of the things of the beauty of the sport and the athleticism of it and everything else about it, it's those unique stories of every individual and how they got to be, you know, like I said to you backstage on the whole issue of javelin. I'm not surprised at all that a javelin that came from Trinidad, because
Yeah, that makes
throw a
one of you.
javelin and you bowl fast are exactly the same
Yes,
thing. It's in the hips and it's in the arm and it's with the explosiveness. So for me, I'm not surprised that it came out of the Caribbean at all. I'm quite surprised that a javelin that came out of Kenya. And I think there's a story, you know. So for me, it's these great stories that come out all the time. And like you said, you never know where the next one's coming from. And that for me is what makes it special.
Spencer?
Well, I think the beautiful thing is how many sports do you get men and women of different shapes and sizes
Correct.
on the track and,
Yes.
and on the field competing at the same time?
And I mentioned this yesterday in the press conference. No other sport in the Olympics gives out more medals to more countries. We are the most level playing field of any sport.
All right, can I just add?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
So, I think South Africa is quite different in maybe a number of ways, where you got sort of the track and field side of things, you got the marathon side of things.
Yes.
So there's a lot of support for the major marathons that we have. Might not be a lot of money, but there is support in terms of viewership and broadcast. So whether it be Comrades, Two Oceans, and in recent time, the Soweto Marathon, where Nike has come on, and Adidas came on board with the Two Oceans Marathon in Cape Town. The issue is track and field. So we're dealing with different worlds. I think that's where potentially we need to sort of separate the conversation for South Africa, as in to say, we don't speak about athletics broadly, but track and field, and by the same time, you also speak about marathons.
Yes.
Which are ultras on that world as well, which I remember, I happen to have lived in sort of two different worlds. I was at Nike before, so my world is sort of how Spencer sees the world now, in terms of it makes sense for athletes to be on board because it's about performance. It starts with performance. Whereas from a Vodacom perspective, does performance really matter that much as it does for Adidas or Nike, Reebok, Puma? However, it becomes a challenge, I guess. Sort of, you asked earlier around why doesn't SAB get involved? You can ask the same question to Vodacom.
Yes.
I then throw it back as well. Is what are you selling to me? It's kind of to a certain extent feel like a bank at times. My inbox, I'm sure, by just sitting here, there's proposals coming in.
Yes, we saw you at the Global Agro. You said that we'd like to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So proposals are coming in every day.
Yeah.
I sit there and I think, what are you asking me to do? You feel like I'm asking for a donation. So people kind of come, can you help us? That's the sentiment that you get a lot of times in terms of people asking for money. So it's not around, this is what we can do for you. It's kind of, can you help us put this together? Without your support, it cannot happen. So speak to our foundation. Don't speak to me.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to manage the interests of APSA sponsorship in track and field athletics, as well as Engines International Investment, as well as Almush at one time. And all three of those companies pulled out of athletics.
Why?
Quite simply, they weren't seeing a return on their objectives. And the Federation and the MSC spoke about it earlier from a corporate governance point of view, was letting them down. So for the brands, it's about reputational risk. These are listed companies. Shareholders buy their shares, but if they get involved with federations and or events that are not living up to the expected standards in terms of presentation and delivering on what they said they were going to do, the shareholders turn around and say, you need to invest somewhere else where it's less controversial and where we can get a return on investment. But I can tell you now that if the right people in this room took a half an hour on Saturday after this conference, we have enough intellectual capital here. We can have a track and field season televised next year from January through to April, including an international test, just like it used to be, and it won't even cost as much as a Vodacom pays for the rights fee for a horse racing event that happens one weekend. So with 10 million rand.
Wow.
Well,
that's encouraging to hear you say that. You would know.
That can happen. You can go to any school's event during January, February, March every year. It happens all over the country. Track and field is embedded in the school system. So it's not like we're trying to mine for diamonds and we can't find it.
Right.
It's already there.
Right.
So there's no problem with the talent. There's a young chap in Stellenbosch who's 15 years old who ran 49 seconds for the 400 meters and won the South African championships. He's already signed up.
Wait, he won the South African senior championships or the junior championships?
Under 15,
Okay.
But he's already signed up a contract with the Provincial Rugby Federation. So he's lost for athletics. Because there's no opportunity to earn a living out of the sport. Because with no events, no prize money, no appearance fee. So all the diamonds are there. What we need is a framework for them to compete. And if the federation doesn't have the wherewithal in terms of a CEO or general manager that's commercially minded to make it happen, then outsource it like they did in Britain with Alan Pascoe and Fast Track. Give it to somebody who knows what they're doing. But what you are denying is all those athletes an opportunity to earn a career and to, develop themselves as athletes. It's quite simple. I can tell you now, you can sit down for a half an hour. There's enough intellectual property amongst here, in here, we can have track and field back on TV and full stadiums. Maybe not 50,000 people, but you can have 20,000 people. It can be done.
Can I offer a Kenyan perspective?
Absolutely.
And I guess probably
We
some
welcome
people are
all
surprised.
perspectives here at the GAC.
People are surprised that I'm offering a Kenyan perspective, but for the last 5 or 6 months, Kelvin and I have been working with Athletics Kenya.
Yes.
Now, it's fascinating to compare Athletics Kenya to the state of athletics in this country because, as everyone knows, Athletics Kenya produces a conveyor belt of talent.
Yeah.
Gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal winners across a variety of middle and long distance formats. But within Kenya itself, athletics is in a very interesting space. Almost no local athletics is actually broadcast on television.
Right.
And they have a very, very small pool of sponsors. And part of the problem is because Kenya produces so many great athletes, it's almost like local Kenyans take it for granted. They take their success for granted. Mm-hmm. And as an outsider coming into Kenya, it's been fascinating to see that. We have this perception of Kenyan athletes being these huge superstars, but the perception within Kenya is very different. And that's something that we're working to try and overcome from a commercial perspective.
I want to go back to your point about this, as you said, how relatively easy it would be to create an athletic series here. You said by next year. We're in November.
I can tell you now, the athletes from overseas come in 2 tranches. They train in Potchefstroom, they train in Pretoria, they train in Stellenbosch.
Yes.
They're already here. You sit down with their manager and say, guys, at some point in time you need to do a test to see where you are. You might want to do a 60 meter, you might want to do a 150 meter, maybe an odd distance. Are you prepared to help us? What we'll do is we'll provide transport, we'll throw in some added value, we'll get you some discounts, and we'll make your life easy. The deceased Andy Norman used to do that in the old days.
Yes.
You know, Fatima used to come out with him, and they used to do it in Stellenbosch. Then they went with Jan Leslie and the guys to Potchefstroom, and now all of a sudden you've got javelin throws there. You know, so these athletes bring enormous wealth of experience and help our local athletes to perform better. There's more than enough money to do this. But somebody needs to sit down and speak to the sponsors in the language that they want to hear and say, how can we help you achieve your business and communication objectives through the sport of athletics?
Staying on
Somebody
that
needs
subject.
to have that conversation.
Yes. Okay, good.
Just adding on to that. So Errol and I potentially sit in an unfortunate space. Because when people think sponsors, first thing is let me go to big corporate.
Of course.
There's a multitude of companies in South Africa which people don't approach or don't even think about approaching.
That's what you guys get for giving. It's true. It's true.
But-
If you have a history of giving to sports people think, hey, we'll go to them. They gave before.
But that mindset, even the words you're using, becomes how people approach it.
Yes.
They give. So it's kind of, you're going to give it to us, and we move on. So you spoke of, it was mentioned now about sort of corporate governance. And so there's never the thinking about, this is the package I am giving to you
Yes.
as a potential sponsor. Does it speak to you? Potentially not. It might speak to the local butchery in my community. Potentially, for the schools. It might solve that problem. But the butchery is not sexy.
Yeah.
Why bother speaking to them? But it could solve your problems.
Yeah.
But now I must go to a Vodacom, I need to go to a big corporate like SAB, or whatever it may be. But the money is there.
I want to stay on this. I like where this is going. I want to stay on this. But I want to go around a little bit and ask you guys, okay, if this thing is going to happen, I don't know the lay of the land in this continent and in this country. So let me ask it. Can that series happen? Can it get off the ground? Can it be successful without the presence of corporate South Africa? That's the first thing, right? I want you guys to start thinking about this. And secondly, each of you brings something very unique to this discussion. Athlete, sponsor, everything else, right? I want you to tell me what, in your estimation, is the most important thing. If we were making a list of the 5 most important things for that thing to happen, tell me what would be your most important thing. Would the most important thing be that it was well advertised? Would the most important thing be that you got a truckload of money? Would the most important thing be that South African athletes committed to running it? Let's start with you.
I think the most important thing is athletes.
Most important thing is
Of course,
athletes?
it starts with the
More
athletes.
than money.
More than the money.
Okay. Why?
Well, I mean, I think it comes back to the point about content and stories. I mean, ultimately, looking at it from a sponsor perspective, we have to provide platforms for sponsors, and we have to provide them stories that they can leverage.
Yes.
So for me, that's, the athletes have to be the starting point and the center of any discussion.
Okay. Can it happen without corporate South Africa money?
I don't think so.
I tend to agree. And I know nothing about
Yeah.
how things work here, but
I'll tell you what's required, okay? You need 6 million rand, which is a drop in the ocean.
what's that, 600,000 US?
Yeah.
Yep.
To run 6 events,
Wait a minute, 600,000 per event or for the whole series?
the whole series. The whole series.
Who are you guys bringing?
Certainly I'm bringing both.
Not both, no, both. No, no.
So what I'm talking about, okay?
Might have to bring me back and me change my shoes.
What I'm talking about is let's call it a national series where you have 6 events, track and field events, each one with a budget of R1 million, and we accept that we can't bring out all the world stars.
Of course.
But you can go to Rustenburg, okay, and you can work with the Royal Bafokeng tribe, who offered the stadium for nothing, and you can quite easily get a number of BC athletes running under 10 seconds. We have one South African who's done it at
You guys
altitude.
have C athletes running under 10 seconds?
No, I'm
Where?
saying worldwide athletes.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
So
okay.
we can have a couple of guys that are training here that can help Simon Mahakwe to perhaps run at altitude, run a 9.97. Okay? But we could do it up at altitude. And it will capture the imagination of South African public. Have 2 or 3 guys running under 10 seconds. That's not going to cost you more than R1 million to put the whole thing together.
Can I interrupt you briefly? Because
One
I can
event.
tell you exactly what would happen if this was in Trinidad. You can have all the local athletes you want, right? They're like, yeah. They're Trinis, we know them. Unless you have some international athletes
Correct.
on the track, it's, you know, they say a king is not without honor, except in his own country. Do you guys suffer from that here? Where I know you can have your Commonwealth champion and all the ones that I would pay attention to because they do well on the international circuit. Would it be imperative of you guys to have some foreigners as
Absolutely.
well?
So
Is that how?
absolutely. You wouldn't want Johan Blake, you wouldn't want Usain Bolt because we can't afford them. We have
Right.
to be realistic, okay?
Yeah.
But you can have 3 or 4 guys go under 10 seconds. But then the most important thing is that your media partner, doesn't matter who it is, at this stage it's a South African broadcaster, they need to buy into the vision as well and help us build an audience. So they need to be savvy enough to say we're in a partnership. There's one common denominator for the sport, for the rights holder being the federation, for the sponsor and for the broadcaster is viewership. Viewership drives up
Viewership,
the
yes.
ad rate so they can make more money. Everybody wins. So you have to sit around the table and say, guys, there's one common objective. We want more people watching the sport. How do we package it? How do we make it sexy for them? And you don't need a lot of money to do that.
Right.
We have the talent. We have the athletes. It's about creating a common vision, and that's where leadership comes in.
What
So
would
we
be-
need the
yeah.
federation to lead the process.
What would be your most important thing?
For me, and I think Chris was getting to that now, I think athletics needs to communicate a common goal and a common view. And athletics in this country, and Alana alluded to it, hasn't had it for a long time. And I think, going back, there's 2 things in this that we should understand. I think the money's there, and I agree with Chris. There's more money being spent on sponsorship in athletics broadly in South Africa today than ever in history.
Really?
But it's all in mass participation. So for us, and I think in the mass participation market in this country, there's a pretty common goal, and delivery of content is world class. And that's just where we need to take track. The abilities here, the skills are here. It's about having what is the common vision, what is the common goal, and the money will flow, the athletes will come, the broadcasters will come. That for me is the key.
Now, Lena, former athlete, Olympic medalist, is there something that is your vision of what you think would be the most important thing a little different?
I really think it should be and cannot be without collaboration. So the federation,
But let me stop you right
the
there.
government.
Let me stop you right there. Regardless of what you guys love, don't love about your federation, what my experience has been, and I have worked with the Australian Federation, I coach the Saudis, everybody thinks their federation is the worst ever. It's like everybody thinks their drivers are the worst ever. Everybody has their own issues with their federation. Everybody thinks, oh, the politics, this and that and the other. So it's established that very often the federation can be a little dysfunctional, right? So I only interrupted you to sort of suggest that despite the politics, despite the politics, is it the kind of thing where you can sort of unite around a common goal and feel like, you know what, this thing is so important to our country that even the people in the Federation who hate each other and the people who don't get along, do you have real optimism that your Federation can put those differences aside for this common goal?
Absolutely, and I think, that is certainly something that can bring people together, because at the end it's going to be a people's-driven
Yes.
game.
Yes.
If we get the right people to get involved, the sponsors are there. So with a collaborative effort, we can execute that. I think we've got great talent. We've got really credible sport agencies that can execute fantastic events, world-class events. But just to bring them all together with this common goal, I truly believe within months we can execute something exceptional that will be beneficial to the athletes, the sponsors, and putting the first steps into place to move forward. But it really is addressing also the challenges that you mentioned by just doing things exactly the same that we've been doing it for the last 100 years. We're not going to get different results. So to think more innovative around it and say, but let's take hands in this and execute something exceptional.